Beneath the fractured ice of the sacred lake, a single breath became the echo of forgotten gods, whispering rebirth from the depths where light dared not follow. Loon's world had always been one of shadows, cast long and indifferent across the frozen thresholds of the northern Pax. Born under a moon veiled in storm clouds, she entered life as an omega marked by silence. No cry, no spark of the wildfire that ignited in her kin. The elders called it a curse, a blemish on the bloodline of the Silverfang clan, whose alphas ruled with iron jaws and unyielding loyalty to the ancient rites. From her earliest breaths, Loon was shunned, her presence a reminder of frailty in a realm where strength was etched in scars and howls that split the night. The wind howled now like a lament, whipping through the jagged peaks of the Frostspire Mountains, carrying the scent of pine resin and distant blood. Snow fell in relentless veils, blanketing the ritual ground in white that muffled the footsteps of the gathered pack. Torches flickered along the lake's edge, their flames dancing like captive spirits, casting erratic shadows on the faces of those who had come to witness her end. The air bit deep, a cold that seeped into bones and souls alike, turning breath to frost and resolve to steel. Loon knelt at the water's brink, her thin shift clinging to her skin like a shroud soaked from the earlier flurries. Her wrists were bound with cords woven from wolf sinew, rough against the pale flesh that bore no marks of battle or mating, no claim, no honor. At 19 winters, she was a ghost among them, tending hearths and mending hides in the dim corners of the longhouse, her eyes the color of storm-tossed seas, holding secrets she herself did not understand. Whispers followed her, barren, weak, a vessel unfit for the goddess's grace. But tonight, under the bloated moon that hung low like a watchful eye, those whispers had sharpened into decree. Elder Thorn, his fur-lined cloak heavy with the weight of authority, stepped forward. His voice rumbled like grinding ice, laced with the false piety of tradition. "The sacred lake demands purity," he intoned, his gaze sliding over her as if she were refuse. "You, Loon, born without the moon's fire, have tainted our hearth." The rite of purification was meant for the dead, the fallen warriors who seek the goddess's judgment in stillness. Yet the council decrees it for you, a living offering to cleanse the pack's shame. Her heart pounded, a frantic rhythm against the cage of her ribs, but she lifted her chin, tasting salt on her lips that was not from the snow. Around her, the pack murmured, alphas with broad shoulders and betas with hardened stares, their breaths mingling in the chill. No one met her eyes. Even the omegas, those who had shared stolen glances of solidarity in the shadows, looked away. Betrayal bloomed in her chest, sharp as a thorn, for she had served them faithfully, her hands calloused from labors no one else would claim. But rejection was her birthright, woven into her like the pale strands of her hair that caught the torchlight like moonlight on frost. They had come for her at dawn, dragging her from the solitude of the outer stables where she slept among the beasts. The purification was forbidden for the living, a desecration of the old ways. But desperation bred heresy. Whispers of famine and rival packs encroaching from the shadowed vales had twisted the elders' fear into this madness. Loon was the scapegoat, her unmarked body the easiest sacrifice to appease the spirits. Rough hands gripped her arms, pulling her toward the lake's edge where the ice had been shattered earlier that day, a dark maw yawning amid the frozen expanse, steam rising like the breath of the underworld. The water below was black as congealed blood, sacred and unforgiving, said to be the tears of the moon goddess herself, frozen in eternal grief. Legends spoke of it swallowing the unworthy, granting visions to the pure, but none alive had tested its depths. Loon's bare feet sank into the snow, numb and unfeeling, as if her body already conceded to the cold that awaited. "Please," she whispered, her voice a fragile thread lost in the wind. Not to Thorn, but to the moon above. its silver light fracturing on the ice like shattered promises. What strength was there in mercy when the pack chose cruelty to survive? Her mind raced with fragments of half-remembered tales, whispers of a hidden gift in the blood of the Forsaken, a pathfinder's sight that bridged realms. But doubt clawed at her. She was no legend, only Loon, the unwanted. The shove came without warning, a brutal force that sent her tumbling forward. Time slowed as she fell, the world inverting in a blur of white and flame-lit red. The cord bindings bit deep as she hit the water, the shock of it stealing her breath, a vice of ice closing around her limbs, dragging her under. Bubbles erupted from her lips, silent screams swallowed by the depths. The cold invaded her veins, a searing burn that blurred pain and numbness, her lungs burning for air that would not come. Deeper she sank, the lake's embrace a velvet tomb. The moonlight above sealing shut like a frozen lid. Shadows stirred in the murk, ancient sigils glowing faintly on submerged stones, half-seen ruins of a temple lost to time. Her vision dimmed, the weight of rejection pressing like the water itself, a final judgment. In that silence, as her struggles faded, a warmth flickered at her core, not fire, but something lunar, ancient, stirring like a dormant howl. Yet the surface world receded, the pack's distant chants fading to echoes. Loon's last thought was not of vengeance, but of a quiet wonder. What if the depths held not death, but the first true breath of her life? The ice groaned above, and the world went still. Darkness yielded to a shimmer, not of light, but of silver veins pulsing through stone, as if the lake's heart had begun to beat anew. Loon's eyes fluttered open, her body weightless in the cradle of submerged ruins, where the water no longer clawed at her lungs, but lapped gently, warm as a mother's forgotten touch. She floated amid crumbling arches etched with sigils that hummed like distant thunder, their glow tracing patterns across her skin. 5 crescent brands, searing fresh into her flesh like brands from the goddess's own forge. They burned without flame, a deep ache that wove through her ribs, her wrists, the hollow of her throat, each one a lunar scar pulsing in rhythm with her slowing pulse. Panic surged, but it was muted, tangled in the ethereal haze that bound her here. The sacred lake's depths were no grave. They were a womb of secrets. The air, or what passed for it, thick with the scent of ancient moss and salt-kissed stone. She tried to move, her bound hands drifting like pale weeds, but the cords had dissolved, frayed by whatever alchemy stirred these waters. Above, the ice remained a vaulted ceiling, fractured yet unyielding, moonlight filtering through in prismatic shards that danced on the temple floor. This was no myth of the elders, it was real, visceral, the cold seeping into her marrow even as that inner warmth bloomed, uncoiling like a fern under spring's first thaw. A low rumble echoed through the chamber, not from the water, but from the shadows beyond the sigils. Figures emerged, spectral yet solid, their forms coalescing from mist and memory. 5 alphas, towering and regal, each clad in armor of frost-forged silver and hides stained with the red of old wars. They were not men of her time, but echoes of legend, brothers in blood and burden, kings of realms long sundered by betrayal. The eldest, Thornivar, bore eyes like storm clouds, his broad frame etched with the gilt of a crown seized in fratricide, his hand forever reaching for a brother's lost throat. Beside him, Eirik, the wanderer, his face scarred by exile's whip, carried the weight of packs abandoned to famine. Then Lear, the seer, blind in one eye yet seeing too much, haunted by visions that drove him to madness. Garrick, the warrior, muscles corded like ancient roots, his soul scarred by the blood of innocents spilled in righteous fury. And youngest, Silas, the diplomat, his smile a mask over the treachery that shattered alliances, his fingers stained with ink and indirect death. They encircled her, their presence a storm of instinct, alpha dominance rolling off them in waves that made her skin prickle, her omega core instinctively yielding even as fear coiled tight in her belly. Lune shrank back against a pillar, the brands on her body flaring in response, linking her to them like invisible chains. Who were they? Not saviors, but predators from the veil, their gazes piercing her as if she were prey reborn. Thornivar stepped closest, his voice a gravelly echo that vibrated through the water. "The lake has chosen," he murmured, his breath visible even in this suspended realm, carrying the tang of pine and iron. "An omega, unmarked no more, but why you, forsaken one? The goddess mocks us with her riddles." She wanted to flee, to deny the pull that tugged at her soul, a curiosity laced with terror, like gazing into a flame that promised warmth but threatened to consume. These were no mere spirits. They were the 5 kings of the lunar accord, ancestors whose guilt had fractured the northern realms, their bloodlines cursed to wander until redemption bridged the chasms they wrought. Lune had heard the tales in hushed longhouse whispers, brothers bound by oath, torn by ambition, their fall seeding the wars that birthed her own clan's fragile peace. Now they stood before her, Feridos in spirit, their forms flickering as if the lake sustained them only through her awakening. Eirik knelt, his scarred hand hovering near her branded wrist, not touching but close enough that she felt the heat of his regret. "The sigils bind us," he said, voice rough as wind-scoured rock. "You bear our marks, girl, the bridge we lost. But trust no king lightly, we are as much cage as crown." Fear warred with an inexplicable draw. Their guilt mirrored her own rejection, a shared fracture under the moon's indifferent gaze. She should hate them, these ancient tyrants who echoed her pack's cruelty, yet curiosity bloomed, instinctive, pulling her toward the enigma of their eyes. Storms of blue and gray, holding depths she longed to plumb despite the danger. Lear's blind eye gleamed unnaturally, his whisper cutting the silence. "The gift stirs in you, Pathfinder, visions of realms unhealed. But to embrace it is to invite our shadows into your light." Garrick growled low, fists clenched, the air thickening with his restrained fury, while Silas watched with calculating calm, his presence a subtle snare. They argued then, voices overlapping in the watery gloom, protect her as the key to their absolution or claim her to reclaim their thrones. Lune's heart raced, the brands pulsing like second heartbeats, syncing with theirs. Denial clawed at her. She was no pawn, no vessel for dead king's redemption. Yet the connection hummed, born of fear's sharp edge and the spark of wonder. What if she was not cursed, but chosen? The temple trembled, sigils flaring brighter, urging her toward the surface. The kings faded slightly, their forms pressing closer, a chorus of warnings and pleas. "Rise with us," Thornivar urged, his hand extended at last, "or drown in denial." Lune hesitated, the water's embrace both sanctuary and prison, her choice teetering on the brink of rebirth or ruin. "And now I invite you to leave a trace of your presence in the comments. Tell us where in the world you're watching from, and the exact hour you hear this story. We wish to know how far these northern confessions travel and at what moments of the night they find you." The surface shattered like a vow broken under the moon's unyielding gaze, shards of ice raining down in crystalline fury as Lune broke free, her gasp a raw hymn to the night. Water streamed from her hair in silver rivulets, mingling with the blood that trickled from the fresh brands on her skin. 5 crescents, each a tether to the kings who now flanked her, their spectral forms solidifying into something perilously real under the open sky. The sacred lake spat her back into the world like a reluctant oracle, the frigid air slamming into her lungs as she clawed onto the frozen bank, her shift torn and clinging like a second skin etched with frost. The pack's ritual ground lay abandoned, torches guttered to embers in the snow, their smoke curling like ghosts fleeing the dawn's pale threat. No chants echoed now. The silver fang had scattered at the lake's unnatural roar, whispers of abomination already seeding the wind. Loon's body trembled, not just from the cold that gnawed at her bones, but from the weight of the king's presences. Thornvar's brooding shadow to her left, Eric's restless vigilance at her right, the others forming a ragged circle that pulsed with their shared guilt. They were no longer confined to the depths. The brands had bound them to her, pulling their essences through the veil, manifestations forged in moonlight and regret. Yet their eyes held no triumph, only the haunted flicker of men who had toppled empires only to inherit ashes. "We cannot linger," Garrick growled, his voice a thunderclap that vibrated through the snow-dusted pines, his massive frame scanning the tree line where distant howls rose like accusations. The warrior king's fists clenched, veins bulging like roots seeking soil, his ancient fury barely leashed. Rivals from the encroaching Ironclaw packs prowled these borders, drawn by the disturbance like wolves to a fresh kill. The lake's awakening had shattered more than ice. It had cracked the fragile truce that held the northern realms in uneasy peace, and Loon, reborn, marked, was the fracture's living proof. She pushed to her feet, legs unsteady as a fawn's, the brands throbbing in sync with her pulse, each one whispering fragments of their histories. Thornivar's fratricide in a throne room slick with brothers' blood, Irik's exile amid starving howls, Lear's visions of fire devouring villages he could not save. Empathy stirred unbidden, a warmth uncoiling in her chest amid the chill, mirroring their fractures to her own rejection. But fear clawed deeper. These kings were not saviors but storms incarnate, their protection a gilded chain. "Why me?" she rasped, her voice hoarse from the depths, tasting salt and iron on her tongue. "You speak of bridges and destinies, but I am no throne for your ghosts." Silas stepped forward, his diplomat's poise a silken blade, eyes like polished obsidian reflecting the moon's descent. "Because the goddess weaves no accidents, little bridge," he murmured, his breath warm against the biting wind, carrying the faint scent of aged parchment and spilled wine. "Our bloodlines sundered the realms, betrayals that echo in your clan's weakness. You bear our scars now. Through you, we might mend what we rent. But the packs will see heresy, a threat to their thrones." His words were honey over venom, rationalizing the pull she felt, the instinctive yield of her omega soul to their alpha auras, even as curiosity warred with the urge to flee. The argument ignited then, low and fierce, as they moved through the shadowed forest. Boots, her bare feet leaving bloody prints in the snow, crunching over needles iced with rime. Thornivar's voice rumbled first, heavy with the weight of his crown's curse. "She is the key to absolution. We shield her, guide her gift, or our guilt devours us eternally." Irik countered, his scarred face twisting in the torchlight they conjured from will alone, flames that burned blue and cold, defying the wind. "Shield? You mean cage, brother. She's no tool for your redemption. Let her choose, or we repeat the sins that bound us here." Lear, trailing with blind eye fixed on unseen paths, whispered of visions. Realms fracturing further if she fell, her death unmaking the fragile threads of fate. Garrick paced like a caged beast, growling of enemies closing in, his warrior's instinct demanding they claim her strength before rivals did. Silas wove diplomacy into discord, suggesting alliances forged in her name, his calculations a subtle snare that made Loon's skin prickle. She felt it all, their guilt as a tangible fog, seeping into her pores, blending with her own shame like blood in water. The forest thickened. Ancient sentinels of pine and fir cloaked in white, their branches clawing at the sky as if pleading to the fading moon. A distant weevo pierced the night, not wolf, but something fouler, the Ironclaw scouts drawn by the lake's tremor. Heart-pounding, Loon stumbled, a root snagging her ankle, and Thornivar's hand caught her arm, firm, unyielding, yet his touch ignited no dominance, only a shared tremor of isolation. In that moment, denial cracked. Their brokenness echoed hers, not as pity, but as a mirror, forging the first thread of bond. Mercy, she thought. What was strength if not choosing to see the wound beneath the crown? They crested a ridge, the wind whipping snow into veils that stung like accusations, revealing the faint glow of a hidden cavern mouth below. A sanctuary of ice-veined stone, legends whispering of it as a temple outpost for lunar pilgrims. Garrick led the descent, his form a bulwark against the gathering shadows, while Lear's hand on her shoulder guided her steps, his touch conveying fractured glimpses. Futures where kingdoms healed or burned, her choice the fulcrum. Inside, the cavern's depths exhaled a breath of ancient warmth, walls etched with faded sigils that hummed in recognition of her brands. The kings formed a perimeter, their presences warding the entrance as howls echoed closer, the common enemy binding them in fragile truce. Lune sank against a boulder, the fire Silas kindled crackling with ethereal blue flames, casting their faces in stark relief, melancholy, etched deep, ethical burdens, bowing shoulders that once commanded legions. Empathy deepened, transforming fear's sharp curiosity into something visceral, a quiet acceptance that their protection, however flawed, was her shield against the world's rejection. Yet as the night deepened, the brands pulsed with warning. This refuge was temporary, her gift stirring like a storm beneath her skin, promising revelations that could unite or unravel them all. What path would she forge, through their shadows or away into the unknown wild? The fire's glow danced on her scars, a silent vow that redemption demanded not surrender, but the courage to bridge the abyss. The cavern's blue flames licked at the shadows, casting elongated specters that danced like unspoken regrets across the ice-veined walls, while the distant howls of the Ironclaw scouts clawed at the entrance like fingers testing a fragile seal. Lune huddled closer to the fire's deceptive warmth, her branded skin prickling as if the sigils themselves hungered for the heat, drawing it inward like roots seeking buried life. The kings encircled her in uneasy vigil, Thornivar's brooding silhouette against the stone, Eric pacing the perimeter with restless energy, Lear murmuring to unseen threads of fate, Garrick sharpening a spectral blade that hummed with restrained violence, and Silas weaving quiet words that masked deeper schemes. Their presences pressed upon her, a symphony of alpha essences that stirred her omega instincts into a turbulent sea. Yield or resist, bind or break. Exhaustion clawed at her edges, the lake's rebirth a double-edged gift that left her body aching and her mind adrift in fragments of their histories, flashes of throne rooms awash in crimson, exiled howls echoing through barren vales, visions of realms splintering like frost under a hammer's blow. She traced a finger over the crescent at her wrist, its glow faint but insistent, pulsing in time with the cavern's subtle thrum. What was this power they claimed she held? A bridge, they called it. But bridges could span chasms or collapse under weight, and she felt the strain already, her soul stretched thin between their guilt and her own unhealed wounds. Mercy, she pondered silently, gazing into the flames that mirrored the red depths of old blood. What form did it take when the fallen sought to rise through the forsaken? A tremor rippled through the earth then, not from the approaching packs, but from within her. A deep vibration that synced with the sigil's rhythm. Lune gasped, clutching her chest as the brands ignited, not with pain, but with a luminous clarity that flooded her veins like moonlight-piercing storm clouds. Visions cascaded, unbidden and vivid. Thornivar's realm of jagged peaks, its packs fractured by his brother's spilled blood, the earth barren where oaths had once bound them. Eric's wandering clans, starved and scattered, their howls silenced by his flight from famine's grasp. Lear's seer's domain, shrouded in prophetic mists, where unwarned fires devoured the innocent. Garrick's battlefields, scarred with the ghosts of warriors, felled not by foes, but by his unyielding wrath. Silas's courts, alliances crumbling under the ink of his betrayals, whispers of poison lingering in the air like unmet promises. She saw it all, not as distant tales, but as living wounds, threads of bloodlines tangled and torn, their colors bleeding into one another, white frost mingling with deep crimson, gray steel yielding to ancient gold. And through it, her own rejection wove in, the Silverfang's shame a knot that, if unraveled, could mend the sundered whole. The gift manifested as a surge, her hands glowing with silver light that spilled outward, touching the kings without contact. Thornvar stiffened, his storm cloud eyes widening, as a phantom warmth eased the eternal chill of his fratricide's regret, a fleeting vision of his brother's forgiveness flickering in his gaze. "By the goddess," he breathed, voice rough as grinding stone, kneeling unbidden before her. You heal the fracture. The bridge lives in your touch." Eric halted his pacing, scars on his face seeming to soften under the ethereal glow, memories of abandoned packs resurfacing not as torment, but as paths to return. "It's true," he murmured, wonder threading his exile-worn tone. The Pathfinder's sight, realms unlinked, now stirring through you. Lear's blind eye gleamed fully, his whispers falling silent as clarity pierced his madness, futures aligning in her light like stars emerging from eclipse. Garrick's blade stilled, the warrior's fury ebbing to reveal the man beneath, his bloodied honor glimpsed in redemption's first dawn. Even Silas faltered, his calculated mask cracking, the diplomat sensing the true power of unity over schemes. But the revelation came with a cost, a visceral pull that drained her, the cavern spinning as the brands burned hotter, demanding she channel more. Lune cried out, collapsing forward, her palms pressing into the snow-dusted stone where silver veins spiderwebbed outward, illuminating faded murals of the lunar accord. Brothers united under the moon, their fall depicted in shadowed fissures. The kings reached for her, their touches grounding yet overwhelming, alpha instincts flaring protectively even as their ethical cores recoiled from the dependency she evoked. "You are the key," Thornivar said, his hand steady on her shoulder, guilt transforming to fierce resolve. "Not to our thrones, but to mending what we shattered. Through you, the bloodlines may flow unbroken." Fear twisted in her gut, sharp as the wind's howl outside, now joined by the crunch of paws on ice, the iron claws closing in, drawn by the cavern's unnatural light. Her gift was no gentle bloom. It was a storm, forcing her to confront the dilemma, wield it to heal these haunted kings and their realms, binding her fate to theirs in compassionate redemption, or withhold it, preserving her fragile freedom amid the encroaching war. The silver light faded, leaving her breathless, the mural's glow a promise and a warning. Destiny revealed not as salvation, but as the raw choice between weaving empires from wounds or letting them bleed into oblivion. The entrance trembled under assault, shadows lengthening, and Lune met their eyes, her voice a whisper forged in lunar fire. "If I bridge you, what becomes of me?" The howls crescendoed, a chorus of betrayal and hunger, as the first Ironclaw silhouette breached the threshold, eyes gleaming with feral intent. In that suspended breath, the cavern held its silence, the weight of her awakening gift hanging like a blade poised to fall, mercy's crown or the pyre of unclaimed power. Subscribe if you believe mercy can crown even the fallen. Comment Luna if you'd walk through the storm for someone who saw your worth. The cavern's threshold buckled under the Ironclaw's assault, splintered ice and stone erupting in a spray of shards that glittered like shattered oaths in the blue firelight. Lune recoiled, her brands flaring with a searing pulse that synced to the intruder's snarls. 5 hulking forms bursting through, fur matted with snow and eyes burning amber with territorial rage. Their alpha lead, a scarred behemoth named Vortigern, bared fangs yellowed by old kills, his breath a hot fog reeking of blood and pine sap. "Abomination!" he roared, gaze locking on her glowing scars. the king's spectral auras manifesting as a haze of silver menace around her. The lake's whore, birthing ghosts to steal our borders, the Silverfang's folly ends here, your blood will seal the truce we shatter. Chaos ignited, visceral and unrelenting, the air thickening with the metallic tang of drawn steel and the acrid bite of fear sweat. Garrick surged forward first, his warrior's form solidifying into a blur of muscle and fury. Spectral blade cleaving the air with a whistle that parted the first attacker's throat in a crimson arc. Blood sprayed hot across the stone, steaming in the chill, its deep red pooling like spilled accusations amid the snow-dusted floor. Eric flanked him, his exile's agility turning the narrow entrance into a choke of death, claws raking fur and flesh as he downed another, his growl a guttural echo of famine's past. Each strike a redemption denied in life, now forged in protective wrath. Thornivar's presence loomed like a storm front, his fratricidal guilt channeling into a bellow that shook the walls, pinning a third Ironclaw against the ice-veined rock with sheer force of will, bones cracking under the weight of ancient regret. Lune scrambled back, heart hammering a frantic rhythm against her ribs, the cavern's confines closing like a vice. The brands burned deeper, her gift surging unbidden, a silver thread lancing from her palm to Vortigern's chest, halting his charge mid-leap. He staggered, eyes widening in shock as visions assaulted him. Not her own, but echoes of the king's fractures bleeding into his mind. The sundered bloodlines that had weakened all packs, including his own Ironclaw, starved by wars born of brotherly betrayal. He clutched his head, howling in confusion, the Alpha's dominance fracturing under the weight of truths long buried. What sorcery! He gasped, dropping to one knee. The remaining scouts faltering in their advance, instincts warring between conquest and the unnatural dread her light evoked. But the respite shattered as shouts echoed from without, deeper howls joining the fray, not just Ironclaws, but Silverfang reinforcements, drawn by the disturbance like moths to a pyre. Elder Thorn's voice cut through the din, sharp as a ritual blade. Seize the heretic. She defiles the goddess's waters, binds the dead to mock the living. Figures poured in, betas and alphas alike, their torches casting erratic shadows that danced with the blue flames, illuminating faces twisted in pious horror. Among them, a traitor emerged, Kyle, a young Silverfang beta who had once shared furtive kindnesses with her in the Longhouse shadows. His eyes now gleaming with ambition's cold fire. He had whispered of her purification to the elders, trading her life for favor, his betrayal a knife twist deeper than the lake's embrace. The kings rallied, their forms flickering with exertion, the binding to her brands straining like frayed sinew. Lear's seer whispers wove through the melee, guiding Silas's diplomatic feints, illusions of multiplied foes that sowed panic among the Silverfangs, while Thornivar and Eric held the line, their ethical cores ablaze with the duty to shield what they had once destroyed. Garrick roared, felling Kale's advance with a blow that sent the traitor sprawling, blood bubbling from split lips, but not before the beta lunged at Lune, claws grazing her arm in a shallow gash that welled warm and sticky. Pain lanced through her, sharp and intimate, mingling with the brand's throb, a reminder that protection came laced with peril, their guardianship a crown of thorns. Pinned against the cavern's rear wall, Lune's breath came in ragged gasps, the metallic scent of blood and the acrid smoke of torches overwhelming her senses. Vortigern rose, shaking off her vision's grip, his rival Alpha snarl promising war. She bridges nothing but ruin, claim her, and the realms bow to Ironclaw might. Elder Thorn echoed from the entrance, his voice a venomous chant. Or burn her, and the goddess restores our purity. The packs clashed in a whirlwind of fur and fang, the king's interventions tipping the scales yet exposing their vulnerabilities. Thornivar taking a slash across his ethereal shoulder that bled silver mist, Iric's scars reopening with phantom agony. Their guilt manifested in every parry, a melancholic fury born of knowing they fought not for thrones, but for the chance at absolution through her. In the heart of the storm, Lune's gift crested again, silver light erupting from her wounds like lunar veins cracking open. It washed over the fray, forcing truths into the combatants' minds. Kael's treachery for power, Vortigern's raids fueled by his own pack's hidden famines, the Silverfang's rejection rooted in fear of their weakening blood. The traitor whimpered, collapsing under the weight of his shame, while Vortigern hesitated, the rival's ambition cracking against the moral mirror she held. Elder Thorn recoiled, piety fracturing as he glimpsed the deeper curse, their rituals a veil for the king's ancient sins that had cursed all northern blood. Yet the choice clawed at her soul, intimate and tearing. Forgive these betrayers. Extend her bridge to heal the pack's divides through compassion's fragile thread, binding her to the king's redemption and the love that resisted yet bloomed in shared fracture. Or unleash the full storm of her power, freedom's wild call, demanding war's mercy, burning the ties that chained her, letting guilt and bloodlines shatter anew. The cavern trembled, stone groaning like a beast in labor, the moon's pale light filtering through cracks above, illuminating her bloodied hands. Mercy or vengeance? What strength lay in choosing when the past's howls demanded her soul as toll? As Vortigern lunged once more, her decision teetered, the air electric with the precipice of kingdom's fate. Vortigern's lunge sliced through the chaos like a shadow, given fangs, his massive frame barreling past Garrick's desperate parry, claws extended toward Lune's throat in a bid for dominance that reeked of desperate conquest. The air hummed with the king's collective growl, a resonant barrier that warped the space between them, but it was her own surge that met him first, silver light exploding from her bloodied palms, not as a gentle bridge, but a whip of revelation, lashing into his mind like frost-cracking stone. He froze mid-air, body convulsing as the visions deepened. His iron-claw realm, not mighty but hollow, packs thinned by the same ancient fractures that haunted the kings, betrayals rippling through bloodlines like poison in a vein, his raids mere symptoms of a deeper rot. Vortigern crashed to the cavern floor, knees buckling, his amber eyes dimming to a haunted gray, the alpha's snarl twisting into a choked gasp of recognition. Lune staggered against the wall, the effort draining her like blood from an open wound, her arm's gash pulsing hot and insistent, mingling crimson with the silver glow that ebbed from her skin. The cavern reeked of iron and sweat, the blue flames sputtering as if recoiling from the violence. Casting the melee in fractured light, shadows of clashing bodies elongating like accusations on the ice-veined stone. Kael, the traitor Beta, lay curled in the corner, his once kind eyes vacant with the shame her gift had unearthed. His whispers to Elder Thorn not born of malice alone, but of a desperate climb from his own omega-tainted lineage. Rejected in the Longhouse's dim corners, much as she had been. He whimpered, claws raking his own fur, the moral weight of his choice bowing him like a reed under storm winds. The Silverfangs faltered, their advance halting as Elder Thorn's pious roar fractured into uncertainty, his torch-illuminated face paling under the onslaught of truths. He saw it now, their rituals, their rejections, echoes of the king's original sins, Thornivar's fratricide seeding division in the blood, Irik's exile starving the fringes, Lear's unheeded visions dooming villages to flame. The elder dropped his blade, its clang echoing like a final judgment, his voice a rasp lost in the dying howls. Goddess, what have we wrought? The Ironclaws too wavered, their scouts exchanging uneasy glances, Vortigern's collapse unraveling their feral unity, instinct yielding to the visceral pull of her light, which painted their ambitions not as strength, but as chains forged in forgotten guilt. Thornivar stepped before her, his ethereal form solidifying further, the slash on his shoulder weeping silver that steamed on the stone, a mirror to her own bleeding arm. His hand found hers without demand, a touch that grounded rather than claimed. His storm-cloud eyes meeting hers with a melancholy depth that stirred the bond deeper. Guilt shared, not imposed. "See them, Loon," he murmured, voice like distant thunder rolling over peaks, carrying the pine scent of his fractured realm. Not as foes, but as we were, broken by the past's unhealed wounds. Your gift lays bare the choice. Forgive, and bridge us all, or let the fractures widen into war's abyss. Eric nodded from the flank, his scarred face etched with the wanderer's quiet resolve, while Lear's blind eye fixed on her, whispering of paths where compassion crowned the fallen, mending realms in lunar silence. Yet freedom clawed at her core, a wild instinct born of the lake's depths, where rejection had first cracked open her soul. The packs encircled them now, not in assault, but in tense stasis, breaths ragged in the chill air that seeped through the cavern's breaches. Snowflakes drifting in like omens, dusting the bloodied floor in white veils. Vortigern rose unsteadily, his rival's pride warring with the vision's echo, extending a clawed hand not in threat, but tentative alliance, the Alpha's voice gravelly with newfound vulnerability. "If your light shows truth, Forsaken One, then Ironclaw bends, but only if you heal what the kings rent." Kale crawled forward, tears freezing on his furred cheeks, his betrayal's sting turning inward. I sold you for a place at the hearth. Forgive or end me. Your mercy decides our worth." The weight pressed upon her, intimate as the brand's persistent throb, each crescent a tether pulling at her essence. The king's ethical melancholy, weaving with her own rebirth's fire, demanding she choose between love's redemptive bind and the solitary liberty of vengeance. What was power, if not the grace, to forgive those who mirrored her pain? The moon's pale gaze filtered through the cracks above, bathing the scene in silver that danced on their faces, illuminating the philosophical precipice. Destiny as revelation, not chain, where compassion could unite bloodlines sundered by war's red hunger, or freedom could unleash a storm that burned all bridges to ash. Loon's heart ached with the visceral pull, the cavern's silence amplifying her ragged breaths, the scent of blood and frost a language of loss. She stepped forward, silver light flickering uncertainly from her fingertips, hovering between Vortigern's outstretched hand and Kale's bowed form. The kings held their breath, their presences a supportive storm, Garrick's restrained fury a bulwark, Silas's calculations yielding to genuine hope. All five bound in the ethical dance of redemption they had long denied themselves. Forgiveness tempted, a tender bloom amid the tragedy, promising to heal not just kingdoms, but the fractures in her soul, binding her to these haunted alphas in a love resisted yet inevitable, born of shared exile under the goddess's watchful eye. Yet war's call whispered too, the freedom to let them shatter, preserving her unclaimed self amid the northern wilds, where rejection birthed not chains, but wings of ice and fire. The cavern trembled once more, a low groan from the earth, as if the lake below stirred in anticipation, the blue flames leaping higher in response to her indecision. Distant weavos rose anew, not from the packs, but from the realms beyond, echoes of unhealed histories demanding her verdict. Loon's gaze lifted to the moon's fractured light, her voice emerging as a whisper forged in the depth's silence. Mercy, or the storm. What crown awaits the bridge that chooses? The air thickened with the precipice's tension, her decision hanging like blood on a blade, the moral fulcrum upon which empires teetered, love as proof, not prize, in the lunar dance of forgiveness and fire. The cavern's blue flames surged like captured stars, their ethereal crackle a counterpoint to the ragged breaths that filled the space, heavy with the scent of blood and thawing frost. Loon stood at the heart of it all, her silver light flickering from outstretched hands. a fragile web that connected Vortigern's tentative claw to Kael's bowed form, threading through the kings who encircled her like ancient oaks weathered by endless winters. The moon's fractured gaze pierced the cracks above, bathing the scene in a cold luminescence that turned the pooled crimson to liquid rubies, each drop a testament to the fractures she alone could mend or widen. Her arm's gash wept steadily, the pain a sharp anchor amid the swirling visions, reminding her that choice was no abstract philosophy but a visceral carving of the soul. Vortigern's eyes, once feral amber, now held a shadowed plea, his massive frame trembling not from defeat, but from the raw exposure of his realm's hidden decay, the famines masked by raids, the bloodlines thinned by the king's ancient betrayals that had rippled outward like cracks in glacial ice. Kael, the traitor whose kindness had once warmed her longhouse nights, lifted his gaze, tears carving frozen paths through his fur, his whisper a broken thread. "End it, Lune," or "Let me stand beside you, if mercy allows." Elder Thorn, stripped of his piety, knelt amid his scattered silver fangs, his voice a hollow echo of the rituals that had condemned her. "We cast you into the depths for our sins. Forgive and unmake them." The kings watched, their presences a symphony of restrained power. Thornivar's brooding resolve a steady warmth at her side, Irik's restless vigilance a wind-scoured shield, Lyr's prophetic silence a guiding whisper, Garrick's leashed fury a bulwark of unyielding honor, Silas's calculated hope now pure, unmasked by the light she wielded. Their brands on her skin pulsed in harmony, each crescent a bridge not just to their guilt, but to the love that had simmered beneath denial, resisted in the lake's depths as fear's instinctive pull, rationalized in the forest's shadows as duty's necessity, now blooming inevitable in this crucible of blood and moonlight. They were no tyrants to claim her. Their ethical melancholy had forged them into mirrors of her rejection, alphas who understood the weight of being forsaken, their redemption hinging not on conquest, but on her compassionate gaze. Yet freedom howled within her, a wild echo from the sacred lake's womb, where the goddess had birthed her not as pawn, but as pathfinder, unbound by thrones or blood oaths. To forgive was to sacrifice solitude, weaving her essence into the realm's healing, uniting the Iron Claw's hunger with the Silver Fang's fear, mending the king's sundered accord through her gift's silver threads, binding her in a union of love that proved redemption's truth. To unleash the storm was to embrace liberty's fierce liberty, letting the visions shatter unresolved, Pax scattering into war's red maw, her power a solitary flame that burned bridges rather than spanned them. What was destiny, if not the freedom to choose despair's faith over power's compassion? The cavern groaned deeper, snow sifting through the ceiling like the goddess's indifferent tears, the distant Weavos rising in a choral demand for her verdict. Lune's heart thundered, the brands igniting a final surge that flooded her veins with lunar fire, visions cascading one last time. Realms reborn in unity, Pax thriving under mended bloodlines, the king's guilt transmuted to quiet strength, her own rejection alchemized into queenship not of crown but of soul. But in that healing, she glimpsed the cost, her light dimming over time, a bridge that bore the weight until it frayed, her freedom traded for the tender ache of love's proof. The alternative burned brighter, wings of ice unfurling, her storms scattering the Pax to forge new paths alone, the kings fading into honorable exile, their melancholy a poignant farewell rather than eternal bind. Pain twisted in her chest. Sharp as the wind's bite, the metallic tang of blood on her tongue, a reminder that rebirth demanded sacrifice, not of flesh, but of the self's unyielding isolation. She exhaled, the silver light steadying, flowing not as whip but as river, enveloping the cavern in a gentle luminescence that warmed the frost-veined stone. "Mercy," she whispered, voice resonant as a temple's bell, carrying the pine scent of resolved winds. "Not for thrones, but for the wounds we share." I bridge you, not as chain, but as choice. The light poured into Vortigern, easing his realm's rot with visions of shared hunts and fertile vales. Into Kale, lifting his shame to forge a guardian's vow. Into Elder Thorn, revealing the goddess's grace in forgiveness's embrace. The pack stilled, instincts yielding to the ethical tide, howls transforming from rage to a unified chorus under the moon's approving glow. The kings closed in, their touches feather light, Thornivar's hand on her uninjured arm, a melancholic anchor, Irik's scarred fingers brushing her hair, exile's wander yielding to home, Lear's palm over her heart, prophecies aligning in peaceful cadence, Garrick's steady grip, fury kindled to protective fire. Silas's gentle clasp, schemes dissolved into true alliance. Love accepted at last, not immediate blaze, but a slow thaw, redemptive and profound, their guilt lifting like mist before dawn, her omega soul finding strength in their alpha depths. The cavern's tremors ceased, blue flames merging with her silver to birth a golden warmth. Sigils on the walls blazing anew, the lunar accord reborn, not in war's blood, but in compassion's quiet union. Yet as the packs knelt in nascent peace, Lune felt the bridge's subtle strain, her light a eternal vigil, freedom's shadow lingering in the choice's wake. Rebirth was no fairy tale. It was the ongoing dance of sacrifice and cure, where love proved the soul's resilience amid the northern wilds. The moon hung full now, unfractured, its light spilling over snow-capped peaks, whispering that destiny and liberty intertwined in mercy's crown. In that renascent silence, the realms stirred toward healing, her heart beating in harmony with the five who had become her fractured whole. Redemption's flame, kindled from rejection's ashes, enduring under the goddess's eternal watch. If your heart beat alongside ours, like, comment, and subscribe. Because every soul that joins our moon keeps the flame of redemption alive.